Hello and welcome along to the RTÉ Rugby podcast, where it's almost time for the main event, the Rugby World Cup, just over a week away. The warm-ups games are done. Ireland's squad is in, and to talk over all of it, I have Bernard Jackman and Mick Kearney for company. Gentlemen, thanks a million for joining us.
Very much for having me.
How are you?
Bert, you were down in Thomond Park a few weeks ago when we were chatting to you. This time you're in lovely outdoor surroundings. Can you tell us where you are today?
I'm down in Bray, Pres Bray. I'm director of rugby at Pres Bray, and they're back. They're back. So in fairness, our SET and JCT have been back for about a month, but they're back. So I'm just down here now. We're getting ready for training this afternoon. So hopefully the Wi-Fi holds up, but it seems to be okay.
Good stuff. We thought you were going out doing an early recce of Marseille or something like that. Beautiful surroundings behind you, but no,
I wish.
Confirm you're just in Bray, yeah?
Just in Bray, yeah, but look, Bray's exotic. Exotic enough.
Well, look, it's perfectly exotic. It's just not quite the south of France in late August, September. But listen, lads, we'll get straight into it. So obviously the Ireland squad was announced on Sunday, and the biggest news, unfortunately, was the injury on Sunday. The biggest news, unfortunately, was the injury to Cian Healy picked up in that game against Samoa, looking like a 5 to 10 week layoff. 5 weeks being the absolute best case scenario. So unfortunately, it's just not going to be enough for him to be included. Jeremy Loughman comes into the squad. The other bits of news around it, an 18-15 split between forwards and backs. But Birch, I suppose, to get straight in with the big news itself, it's Cian Healy missing out. 125 caps worth of experience, was always just an absolutely ideal person to have there in case of an emergency if something went wrong with Andrew Porter. Jeremy Loughman comes in, has 3 caps worth of experience, 2 of those coming in the last couple of weeks. He finished the season very strong, to his credit, Loughman, but obviously you're just talking about a massive gulf between the two levels of experience.
Yeah, look, it's a very hard look on Cian. Obviously, he's done incredibly well to bounce back from various injuries. He's evolved his game. You know, he's less about power now, and he's more about, just doing his role, giving his set piece stability. And probably from an Irish point of view, even though he's not a first choice player for Ireland anymore, obviously Porter is the first choice loosehead, and I think we've done incredibly well to get the squad announced and heading to Paris, which is full strength bar Cian Healy. So effectively our first choice 15 are fit, which I don't think any other country has the luxury of saying. But I think Healy is a very important player for us, because we haven't been able to produce a real strong depth chart at loosehead. It's a big ask for Jeremy Loughman, 3 caps. And Farrell definitely wasn't in the plan. Farrell was hoping another loosehead would have came true and ideally have 15, 20 caps to their name. It just hasn't happened. And it is a significant step back in terms of what he's done so far. As a ball player, I think he's actually excellent. In some ways, maybe a more comfortable ball player than Cian Healy, and that suits how Ireland play. But there is still question marks around him, around set piece, particularly against, a South African or a French or maybe even New Zealand team that we may play in a quarterfinal. So yeah, it's a bit of a blow. But obviously, if Killer stays fit, well then we should be okay. But it's a blow for Healy, but it's an opportunity for Loughman. And ironically or interestingly, he would have been told on Friday that he wasn't going, along with Jacob Stockdale and Tom Stewart, and they all had to play. Obviously, Loughman had to come off the bench, and he probably knew coming off the bench, you'd see a player going off, and the discomfort Cian Healy was in, and yeah, it's a great opportunity for him, and hopefully he rises to the challenge now over the next 6-7 weeks.
Mick, I'm sure you'd know Cian fairly well on a personal level from a good few years playing with him with Leinster and Clontarf connections as well. Like, just for the man himself and the player, an opportunity to be going to a 4th World Cup, it probably puts a massive dent in his hopes of, maybe he might have been thinking about it too much, but all things going to plan, by this time next year, he could very well have passed out Brian O'Driscoll as Ireland's record appearance holder. That's something now that probably looks a little bit in doubt as well. It's just a real tough blow overall for him.
No, for sure. Absolutely gutted for Cian. As you mentioned, I know him quite well personally. So see him hobble off during the game the other day was it was heart-wrenching stuff, because he's obviously had setbacks from an injury point of view, but you also look at some of the opportunities he's missed out on. Now, don't get me wrong, he's had plenty of opportunities on top of that, but like he was ready to go on the lines, did his ankle in the warm-up game for that against the Barbarians. And now, the final hurdle for this World Cup, as you mentioned, to go to his 4th World Cup, which would have been an incredible achievement. It's very disappointing for him, but knowing what he's like as a person, I've no doubt in my mind that he's still thinking that he's going to get out there. He's just an unbelievably driven character, never throw in the towel, and he'll be doing everything he can to get back within that 5-week timeline, so that if someone does have an injury or pulls up in the Ireland camp in his position, he'll be ready to head out. But no, gutted for him personally, and I know the whole country feels the same way.
Yeah, and Birch, that's probably a good point as well, where we said 5 to 10 weeks, given his past and the way he's recovered from injuries. You look at last year in New Zealand when we all thought it was tour over when he injured that ankle in the game against the Maori. A few days later, he's playing in the test match itself. You would probably think he's the kind of guy where if you're talking a 5 to 10 week injury, it's probably going to be around the 5 to 6 week mark when he's fit and available. And if Ireland can go deep in this World Cup, and look, World Cups being what there can be injuries along the way, we could well see him later on in the tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. And look at he added value to us in the fact that he can cover hooker as well, from a scrummaging point of view. So if you had a situation like we had against Scotland, and unfortunately both our hookers have little doubts over them. Our first choice hookers have little doubts over him at the moment. So he had an added value on the bench for that. I think he'll be doing everything in his power to get back as quickly as possible. And there is also warm-up games and fixtures for Leinster maybe where he could get one match in and prove his fitness. So yeah, don't write him off yet. But obviously I think Ireland need to go semi-final, final to have any chance of him getting back.
You mentioned the hookers, and obviously there've been a couple of injury doubts around Ronan Kelleher and Dan Sheehan. I think that the fact that Kelleher, Sheehan and Rob Herring are the 3 hookers that are going would probably lead you to believe that one or both of Kelleher and Sheehan are probably going to be fine for the start of the tournament. But worth mentioning Rob Herring and the impact he brought on Saturday, because I think for so long we probably have been talking about Dan Sheehan and about Ronan Kelleher and their explosive impact, try-scoring abilities, but Rob Herring is a player for a long time has probably gone under the radar in terms of international rugby. And I think in the last 12 months, you look at coming off the bench to score a try against the All Blacks last summer, couple of good impacts in the Six Nations. And when he came on last Saturday, Ireland were in a little bit of a rut. Lineout was a bit all over the place and steered the ship very, very impressively.
Hey, he's a very good player. And I know O'Connell has an incredible amount of time and respect for him, and he may be a little bit of a forgotten man. I actually think our 3 hookers are better than any other 3 hookers. When you measure the collective, and Rob, probably doesn't get game time if Dan and Ronan are fit, but he's invaluable, and he did exactly what Farrell would have wanted from him on the bench on Saturday. He was there as the experienced, probably leader of that scrum. He came on. Gave us some more parity in the scrum. We weren't dominant, but we gave us a little bit of solidity there. We were able to play away from it, and his line out, the line out just settled down, and that wasn't a criticism of Tom Stewart. I thought Tom was a little unlucky. First one, Henderson drops when it's in his hands, and then we threw into the area that McFarland was marshalling, and he's outstanding, and then we lose a couple of 50-50s. Then there's a missed lift and a late lift, and it looks like it's all his fault. But I think Herring's just composure there and Ireland's ability to just throw to space, and then we started to maul Samoa, and everything just settled down, and that's exactly what they want from him. He's a very good set piece hooker. Mick, you played with him, and you obviously scrum behind him and worked in the line out with him. But from what I can see, I just think he's got a very good throw, and he's been there, done that now, and that's what you kind of want. And he showed that at the weekend.
Yeah, I think on that point, Birch, he's probably the best thrower that I ever played with. You know, he just gives the line out so much confidence, and as well, there's a level of stubbornness about him around his throwing. Like you know yourself from playing hooker, he puts it in the same space every single time. You know, so like if the drill doesn't get to that space, he somewhat knows it's not on him. You know, which is lovely. I'd imagine it's a lovely feeling for a hooker, because even though people at home are watching going, oh geez, that's an overthrow or whatever, everyone in the lineout knows kind of in their heart of hearts that it's the perfect ball. We just didn't execute in the line, and I think that's why Ulster's lineout has been so successful in the last number of years, is that he's just, you know, producing an unbelievable level of performance around the throwing side of things.
And would probably go ahead, Bert.
No, I watched him in the Viva warm up, and like I obviously watched a lot of hookers warm up, and and I said this at the time, I've never seen a more natural throw. He's the top of his game in that area. I'm not surprised, you know, in terms of drill, you know, that he's very comfortable, that he's putting it on the money. And again, like when you look at how so much of Ireland's play or attacking play comes from line out, and the fact that we've had some wobbles there a little bit, and he played against England as well, so it's not totally separate to him. But you know, he may end up being a bench player, you know, because of that, because of being able to come on and give you that certainty that you can, not certainty, but you can win your own ball, but improve your chances of winning your own ball, which is brilliant for us. We want to have, you know, in the special positions, we want to have different profiles who add different things, and I think that game for him will have done him loads of good in terms of confidence, but also in terms of strengthening his case for selection for the big games in the match 23.
For the uninitiated, what do you mean when you say he's one of the most natural throwers?
Yeah, look at just his flight. Like, it's like if you watch, you know, a brilliant free taker in hurling, or, you know, David Beckham's, you know, put a cross in, or a free kick. He's just at a different level than most other. And I'm talking about like elite guys like Jamie George, or, you know, Ken Owens, or any of those, you know, Marchand. That's his, for me, when I look at him, like, he's just a beautiful thrower. He has a beautiful technique, style, flight. Yeah, and again, as I said, like, I don't, like, it sounds a bit perverted or something, coming away going, geez, like, I was in awe of it. And obviously, like, it was a skill I struggled with. But like I said, I wouldn't normally watch hookers and be blown away by it. And I don't know, sometimes maybe it's like a golf swing. It's the simplicity. There's beauty in the simplicity, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah, I get you. In terms of some other bits, then 18-15 split, Mick, given the versatility that Ireland have with some second rows that could fill in the back row, like Tadhg Byrne and Ian Henderson and Ryan Baird, would you be confident that they haven't left themselves shortchanged in the pack, or would you have preferred a 19-14 split with an extra loose forward?
No, I actually think the split is perfect. You know, seeing South Africa at 7-1 split on the bench the other night would make me think we maybe should have gone 19-14.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Yeah, but like, at the same time, with the amount of versatility we have there, and as you mentioned, the ability that our guys have to play across the back row and across the second row, I think we're really well covered.
And Bernard, then the knock-on effect of the 18-15 split is Sturt McCloskey picking up that extra backline spot. Now, this day last week, when we were all on the pod, it was myself, you, Johnny Holland, and Fiona Coughlin, and I think the unanimous call was that Sturt McCloskey would lose out. It would be 19-14. I think, though, by Thursday, once the team was announced for the game against Samoa, we saw it was McCloskey and Robbie Henshaw paired together in the centre for the second time in 3 games. I think everyone probably realised at that point McCloskey was going to be in. It was going to be 18-15. Are you pleased with the balance and makeup of that squad?
Yeah, look at that. As I said, I thought he would have lost out, and I still believe he'd lose out if it's 19 forwards picked. But I am actually, and I felt he would have been probably one of the luckiest Irish players to lose out in recent World Cup cycles if he did. So I think it's a good decision by Farrell. As Mick said, we have a little bit of cover. Probably Cian Prendergast, who's the fella who lost out, because of that decision, probably just made his run too late. I mean, McCloskey's had more high-profile games for Ireland, has kind of shown what he can do, and obviously over the last 10 years for Ulster, he's been outstanding. So look, I think it's the right call. And yeah, it means probably we don't have to overuse, hopefully, Gary, as well. We can look after him because I think he's key for us now, particularly you saw him come on the wing, he covering wing as well. I think he's the guy in the back line that we don't, him and Hugo are the two players we don't have a clear backup who's got the same level of experience. So I'm actually really happy for Sturt and obviously disappointed for Cian, who I think has lost out to him. But I think the mix makes sense for this Irish squad given the profile we have.
Yeah, that's like it's a kind of a horses for courses thing when you're talking about what a squad needs. And while a lot of teams might prefer to have that extra loose forward, if you look at the injury profile of Ireland centres over the last 3 or 4 years, we're always picking up 1 or 2 knocks between, like, the amount of times Gary Ringrose, Bundyaki and Robbie Henshaw are all fit and available to play. You could probably count that on one hand over the last few years. So it's clearly a position where there's a high attrition rate and Ireland are picking up injuries a lot. So no harm ultimately to go belt and braces and throw in an extra body in there.
Absolutely. What I find really interesting is that Sturt is probably the only kind of specialist back in the group, excluding
that's ultimately why a lot of people thought he was going to miss the cut, because he didn't have
very much so. Yeah, very much so. You're not like, you're probably not going to play Stu at 13 realistically. He's old fashioned's the wrong word, but he's your kind of like trash ball 12, get the arms free, a very Andy Farrell mode, really, in terms of how he plays and how he's kind of impacted games in the past. So I found it interesting to see that they went with a real specialist 12, and that's, as Birch mentioned, that's going to free up Robbie to slip out to 13 if needs be, and it'll be unusual, but it'll free up Gary to go to the wing if we're in need of that as well.
On the game itself, probably won't even spend too long talking about it, Birch, but any concerns, lingering concerns heading into the World Cup over it, or was it just one of those strange games? Like we saw a lot of strange results over the weekend and strange flow of games. South Africa hammering New Zealand, which will come to, England losing against Fiji, Scotland scoreless for the first half against Georgia at home. 2 weeks out from a World Cup, there's a lot of strange things going on with players that, subconsciously or not, are probably trying to protect themselves a little. You mentioned Jeremy Loughman coming off the bench for Cian Healy, and it has to be in the back of his head that he's not just coming on to play a game here. He's ultimately, this is probably going to be his shot for a World Cup squad as well. So there's so much going on. Would you be reading much into the way the Samoa game went?
No, I don't think so. I think Ireland, obviously, if you look at how Samoa tactically played, they played the conditions perfectly. And Sapawanga, while he missed that kick to touch near the end, I thought he gave them that kind of game management that they have lacked in the past. And obviously he's one of the players who they benefit from being able to re-qualify for Samoa. But along with Luatua and some of the other players who've come back, I thought they look really good. And England, watch out. I mean, so they were sharp. We obviously didn't have a full strength team. I felt that we were trying to overplay a little bit, but without having that kind of, I suppose, security of ball retention, without having a good set piece launch. The types of kicks that they were putting on us were contestable, so it was easier for them to shut us down. Whereas against England, they were kicking long and we were getting to bring it back at them and fall into shape. So I felt probably Ireland were trying to, I suppose, get more attack into their game because we weren't fluid in attack against Italy or England, and because of that, we didn't play the conditions and got into a battle. And obviously, we conceded a try from a kind of an intercept from long range when it looked like we maybe were going to score. and then they get ahead, and it's a little bit messy and disjointed. But I wouldn't read that into it. Obviously, the players knew the squad at that stage, and it's very difficult not to think, geez, if I get injured here, I'm not going to make the trip because it's so late. So, plus the fact that we're missing quite a good few frontliners. So I think it was just a game. Farrell wanted to get down there, play a game late at night, get down to France. And yeah, I think that's effectively what it served its purpose. And as you said, there were some funny results this weekend, or funny performances. And I think with the fact that we play Romania first up, we have another hit out that we don't have to worry about.
Yeah, is that key, Mick? Ultimately, no disrespect to Romania, but results over the last few months would show that they're really not up to it at the moment. Essentially, that first game of the World Cup is like an extra warm-up game.
No, very much so. Look, Romania they're on a different level to where Ireland are at the moment, obviously. So it will be a good chance for guys to get a bit of mileage in their legs. I know a lot of guys have played the majority of the warm-up games, but the guy I'm mainly talking about is Johnny Sexton. So it'd be great for him to hopefully get 80 minutes under his belt and kind of build that cohesion in a game scenario, and just get some minutes into his legs, some minutes into his lungs.
On very quickly on Samoa before we move on, quite impressive at times, and just another spanner thrown into that Pool D mix. I'll tell you an interesting one here now. A few weeks ago, an old friend of mine, he texted me saying, "What would you think if I was to make a little bet on Samoa to win Pool D?" And I said, "Go away, you're an absolute madman. I mean, that's just nonsense." Now, he texted me back on Saturday night saying he showed me the screen grabs as well. He put his little fiver on them to win Pool D a few weeks ago, 225 to 1. After the game against Ireland, they'd gone into 30 to 1 to win Pool D. Now, I don't necessarily think they're actually going to win Pool D, but Birch, do you reckon they've got an outside shot of sneaking into a quarter final at least? Because I mean that pool is wide open.
Yeah, I think they have. I don't think they're not as good as Fiji. There's still deficiency in their game. I actually thought their backfield was quite poor, and you saw Crowley trying to hurt that. But they have a lot of power. They're better organized than ever. They have that mix of experience. So yeah, they could. I mean, I still think England have to improve, surely. But yeah, you wouldn't mind being. What's he on at 250 to 1?
225 to 1.
225 to 1, yeah. It's good value anyway.
Yeah. In fairness, I said to him, I wouldn't have made the bet, but if it was 225 to 1, I might throw in a couple of quid.
Yeah, no, in fairness. It'd be great to be. I think it's brilliant to see those Pacific Island nations better equipped. I think that's, I'd be critical of World Rugby around some of the officiating and things like that, but I think that they are giving them a better chance. And some of that's down to the fact that two teams in Super Rugby, but being able to bring back the likes of Luatua and Sapuanga, I think, and some of the players at Tonga have Fekatoa, etc., is massive. It's massive. It just gives the talent that they naturally have a little bit more support around it. And I think, the Tonga, obviously, we've got to face, but I think all three should have really good World Cups.
To move on from the Ireland game, the weekend started in fairly explosive fashion. South Africa against New Zealand. I have to say, a good while back when I saw South Africa and New Zealand were playing each other at Twickenham a couple of weeks out from the World Cup, I was thinking this is going to be a bit dull, a bit of an anticlimax. And I know the scorelines would suggest it might be an anticlimax, Birch. It was anything but. What an absolutely full-blooded test match that was.
Yeah, the Qatar Cup, was it?
The prestigious Qatar Airlines Cup.
It brought like the atmosphere there was brilliant. I mean, it shows you what the demand for something like that, and you'd wonder, should they nearly play a rugby championship game in the Northern Hemisphere and benefit commercially from it? Look at it, the All Blacks just didn't perform. They didn't fire. I know they flew in Tuesday. I think 8 of their players hadn't played for 4 weeks. And they looked a little bit like they weren't just mentally tuned in. Obviously, there could have been jet lag and a bit of lack of match practice. But so they were a little bit off. They're better than that. And I wouldn't write them off by any manner or means. But South Africa treated that like, it was a fully blown test match or a World Cup game. And were very impressive and laid down a a marker, and the type of win that they got, they'll get massive confidence from that. And Razzie's pumping their tires up as well. Talking about 2019 was nearly an accident. It was a surprise because it was all about 2023. And you look at their squad, and you do see a squad who have the most depth. They have the most depth, and I'm not talking about the bomb squad. I'm actually talking about even deeper than that. And you look at some of the players who are missing at the weekend. So I think they have the two best 15s in this World Cup going into it. But obviously you can only play 23 of them, and they are going to be a big challenge. But they're still, look, you can't judge. I don't think you can over pump up that. I think you can over pump up that result as well. You got to take into the fact that New Zealand was weren't at the races.
They're a really interesting case, Mick, South Africa, where I know they've expanded their game a bit in the last couple of years, but still very much, exactly what you're going to get from them. It's just a case of whether or not you can stop it. It's not like maybe an Ireland, France, or New Zealand where there are a few things that might be throwing at you. You really, when it comes to South Africa, you know what the strengths are. It's just whether or not you're going to be able to match it. And ultimately they played to the height of those strengths on Friday night, and New Zealand didn't have any answers.
For sure. South Africa are just pure violence. And it's not just a South African team, it's South Africans in general. Like Birch will tell you, he would have played with a lot of them over the years. I've played with a lot of them. And they're just physical people. They're just hard people. And that game was, gave a classic indication of that. Good few early latches, big clear outs, hard at the breakdown, hard in the carry. Set piece naturally was how it always is with South Africa, top class. What I really enjoyed about them, and it's something that Roddy Grant used to say up in Ulster a lot, he was like, we want our maul to be so good that it actually gives us an opportunity to do more trick plays. I think with South Africa the other night, they obviously mauled incredibly well in the first half, and then I think maybe first line out of the second half, they do that move around the front, and Marks goes over. After that, another couple of mauls where you can see the All Blacks are going, Jesus. I'd imagine Jace Ryan at halftime was saying, we're going to need to plow into this, lads, otherwise we're in big trouble. Then later on in the game, they do that peel play around the back on the All Blacks 5 and score as well. So it's nice to see them have that bit of variety on top of the maul and brawl that they naturally have. But they're going to be seriously dangerous going into this World Cup. That was well known before the game against the All Blacks the other night. But massive men just trying to go over the top of everyone, and if nothing else, that's very entertaining to watch.
Yeah, and you could see the fear that the All Blacks had, or maybe at the very least the awareness they had of how strong the South African maul was in those first 10 minutes, where it was penalty after penalty after penalty. I think it was 4 penalties in a row for maul infringements in those opening 10 minutes, and we're pretty much lucky to actually avoid getting a yellow card there initially. I know they ended up getting 2 yellow cards in the first 15 minutes anyway, but even inside 5-6 minutes, the All Blacks were gifted to not give away a yellow card. As you said, the damage it does, where if they're constantly worried about it, and ultimately the one time then you don't go for a maul, that just throws something different at them as well.
Completely. I felt, when I seen Lomax go down and Newell come on, in my mind, the way South Africa had started from a set piece point of view, I was thinking, Jesus, this is a bit of a perfect storm. And you'd have to think, I don't know now, but Rassie Erasmus, this is purely based off my own perception, strikes me as being quite a direct character. So I'd be interested to know whether he sits down the 6 or 7 forwards that are going to be coming off and says to them, okay, look, you've 40-50 minutes to burst your bollocks here, and then we're going to bring these other 6 mutants off the bench.
7.
So for
7 mutants.
7 mutants, yeah, 7 mutants on Friday. So you know, it's a case of for poor old Fletcher Newell, who hasn't played a huge amount, for him to be staring down the barrel of maybe a 60-minute shift against, firstly, a relatively fresh Stephen Kitsoff and Malcolm Marks, and then, you know, those two lads roll off, and suddenly Umbanambi and Oxnoche are coming on. Like, I'd say he could have had 15 lads behind him, and he still would be in bollocks.
Let's talk then about that 7-1 split, which, depending on what side of the fence you're sitting on over the last couple of days, it's either the most heinous crime against the values of rugby, or it's the greatest innovation we've ever seen. Bert, where are you sitting on this scale?
Oh, I love it. And I think I try not to listen to any other podcasts or read too much about it, but unfortunately I've got a taste of what some of the Irish pundits are saying.
It's been hard to
on
avoid
my Twitter feed or whatever, and obviously the backlash from South Africa against that. I personally believe that we should be lauding coaches who are taking risks or being creative, right? And obviously they have a profile of player that a lot of us don't have. Like, a lot of countries couldn't. A lot of countries would be afraid to go 6-2, because it doesn't suit the profile of players they have. But they have this squad, and I think they should be allowed and encouraged to play that. And I would love to play against South Africa if they went 7-1. You know, for Ireland, for example. I don't think they will, but there's a massive risk to that. There's a risk, and I know Quagga has played 140 or 50 games at sevens, and he could play in the centre or on the wing. I know that France have Makalou, who could play 7 or winger, etc. Fair play to them. You know what I mean? The hybrid player, it increases the multi-skilled player's opportunity to play at the highest level for their country. And there's a risk. I mean, and I don't know if Rassie, it happened last minute. And I don't know if Rassie would do it against, you know, New Zealand, or sorry, New Zealand or France in a quarterfinal, or Ireland in a pool game, because if you get an injury to a back early, I mean, look, it's not so long ago there was a big debate about is it crazy to go 6-2 and it is crazy, or sorry, it backfires if there's injuries earlier. And also I would say it was 21-0 to South Africa when they brought on those subs. The first choice pack had done the damage. You know what I mean? It wasn't nothing to do with the bench coming on and winning the game late and player safety and all that nonsense. It is fearsome. And you got to be able to deal with it. I think from a New Zealand point of view, it's very interesting because Jason Ryan went into the All Blacks coaching staff last summer, and he was the forwards coach, scrum coach, forwards coach for the Crusaders, and they hadn't conceded a maul try, I think, about 3 seasons. And a lot of other teams kind of studied the Crusaders' maul defense and said, "Oh, that's the way forward." And effectively, for that to get completely torn up and bullied and destroyed late in the game to a World Cup cycle is going to be interesting how the All Blacks kind of re-strategize, or whether it's just a case they just didn't implement it properly. But that's the kind of stuff I love. I love seeing, you know, a strategy that looks foolproof that other teams have copied, and then have the Boks found a way of, you know, of actually taking that apart. And will that prove to be a key weapon for them in this World Cup, or have they shown their hand now? Obviously, they're bigger and stronger than everyone else as a collective. But other teams, I mean, I look back at Ireland's game against them in November, and Ireland opened up a lot of opportunities against them. Now, we didn't take them all, and we ended up getting into a tight battle, but there's space there. And that was probably the most probably annoying thing from an All Black point of view, is they didn't look like they knew how to handle that mad rush. In actual fact, they played into it. And obviously then, you know, the All Blacks get ahead. The Boks get ahead. I think if the Boks get ahead of you, it's very hard to ping them back. But a little bit like Leicester in the Premiership under Borthwick, if you get ahead of them, they have to then open up a little bit, and they're not anywhere near as good. So I love the bit of creativity by Rassie. And as I said, there's an inherent risk to it, and that's what we want. We shouldn't be talking about changing the rules or player safety. I think that's absolute nonsense. And it's sour grey. It's fear from. It sounds like you're scared. You know what I mean? You're scared, and just do what you do well and be able to beat them. Yeah,
and I think over the last couple of days, the biggest thing that's just gone missing is the mention of the risk, where it's kind of just been presented as this foolproof idea of put put 7 or 8 forwards into your pack and you're going to win every game. But as you said, they had Cobus Reinach as their only back. You pick up an injury to an outside centre, to someone like Keenan Moody or someone like that, or inside of Andre Esterhuizen, all of a sudden they were at a pinch of trying to move players around and get things correct. So I mean, one bad injury and that plan goes up in smoke, and you actually are in a lot of trouble as well. Mick, what side of the fence are you on this?
I completely agree with Birch. You know, if teams want to try different things, or they want to, you know, I suppose, be creative around what their plan is going into games, you know, there is a level of risk, as we've discussed, but you know, as we've seen on Friday night, there's also massive reward that can come from that as well. You know, as Birch mentioned, Quagga Smith has played, he has a huge amount of experience in sevens, so like the risk obviously is, if he does have to come on the wing, like you're trying to drop bombs on him as much as possible for the rest of the game from a kicking strategy point of view, you know. But then obviously it worked out the other night that there was no injuries in the back three for South Africa, and he came on and pilfered a load of ball. So yeah.
The funny thing as well, actually, just the fact that it was Quagga Smith. I mean, I know he's a forward, but he's actually on the lighter and smaller side of things when it comes to a forward. I mean, in theory, you could have a far bigger back out there than Quagga Smith.
Absolutely. Like Quagga Smith, you know, again, comes from a hard farming background. Like you can see from his makeup, you know, his nose is essentially on the back of his head. So he's your typical kind of South African groundhog. And you know, I think it's from a squad strength point of view, as Birch mentioned, to bring on someone like him who's a little bit different from a pilfering point of view. Obviously, Malcolm Marks, when he's playing, he's really hard in the ball. Dwayne Vermeulen, he's good in a jackal, as we've seen early in the game the other night. But Quagga Smith, for what I've seen of him, he's the kind of guy that's really, really clever in terms of the breakdowns he goes into, and the ones that he does go into, he always seems to have a really positive impact.
Final point on South Africa then, and I'll put it to both the Birch first. Disregarding 7-1 splits or however many forwards they're going to have on a bench or whatever, in general, how are you feeling about South Africa now compared to this time last week, as an Irish person?
Oh, look, they're bang on form. They look in great shape. Physically, that they'll get huge benefit from that. Like, I think we would need to hit our straps against Tonga, you know, in terms of get our attacking game really flowing to be able to go into that game confident. As I said, you look back at that game in November, and I'd urge anyone to do it. There was a real smart strategy behind how Ireland tried to pick holes in that defense, and as I said, the final pass didn't always go to hand, and we let them off the hook. And it's not easy. It's not easy. Everything has to be done to the absolute limit of perfect execution. But I remember speaking to some of the coach and players after that, and they felt they left a couple of scores behind. And the reality is, I think it's probably one score between us and South Africa. So yeah, I think we can unlock them. I don't think you can go in and try and match the power game and the kicking game. You got to play your way, and thankfully we have a clear identity now of how we play, and with our starters, with Johnny back in, another 3.5 weeks is it, I think we'll be up and running then and go toe to toe with them.
And Mick, a lot of people are talking about, I've seen a lot of people talking about how, is it a case of prioritizing the South Africa game over Scotland, or prioritizing the Scotland game over South Africa? But the fact that there's 2 weeks between those two games, and they have an empty weekend in between the two of them as well, realistically, a team like Ireland can go hell for leather all out for both of those games. And if they do it and they lose against South Africa, it doesn't mean that they're going to be any worse off against Scotland. They should and absolutely could go hell for leather in both of those.
Absolutely. I think we couldn't be better set up from a fixture and schedule point of view, and we should be aiming to go hell for leather into every game. You know, looking from a mentality point of view as well, like, winning's a habit. We're on I think it's 13 game winning streak at the moment. So I can't imagine anyone in the Ireland setup is thinking they're going to go into any of the games in any way half-arsed or think, oh, sure, look, we can lose this one, we'll pick back up for the next one. Not to say that you're saying that now either, Neil. But I think they'll be saying this comes around once every 4 years. This is the biggest show in town. Whatever about being like very good over the last number of years, at the end of the day, this is really all that counts. And this is the one that Ireland haven't won either, stating the obvious. So I'd imagine they'll be mustered to hammer into every opportunity they can get from a game point of view.
Yeah, I absolutely can't wait for those two games already. Final thing we'll talk about, guys, very quickly. England beaten by Fiji. I mean, that was the result of the weekend. Even considering South Africa thrashing New Zealand. But Bert, we've spoken about England pretty much every week now over these last 4 weeks on the podcast. Week on week, confidence looks shattered. The attack has been something we've constantly been talking about, but it's got to a point now where their defense actually looks even more of a pressing concern than the attack itself.
Yeah, their defense is horrific, and it was against Ireland as well. To be fair, when you look back at how easily we opened them up without even being at our best, and it's crazy because like Sinfield and Borthwick and now Wigglesworth and the whole Leicester staff, even the scrum coaches, they're together now, and they've had this group for whatever the guts of 2 months, and even some of the players are saying that they're not training well. There's balls being dropped in training, the intensity is poor, and like what Borthwick's vision of how the game should be played, and that's why he was able to go into Leicester and actually have a quick bounce quickly, because it's not rocket science. It's just doing the basics very, very well, and they're not even doing those. And if they don't defend well, there's no point kicking the ball away as much as they do, because you're going to get punished. So, but they don't look equipped to keep the ball either. It's bizarre. And you look at the experience in the squad, you look at those individuals in that squad in terms of what they've done at international level, last World Cup final, etc. And it's mind-boggling, and they just look bereft of all spontaneity, energy, sense of fun, enjoyment. And it's going to be a huge task for him. An inexperienced coach, obviously well regarded, an expert in what he does, particularly around the line out, etc. But to get them back up now, and I suppose the fallout with the public, the rugby public, 40,000 odd in Twickenham. I mean, the last game before, like the World Cup, it just shows you. I mean, we could sell out the Viva for kind of a World Cup friendly as such at quite high ticket prices. And Twickenham, the home of rugby, is half full. But people, and
it was full the night before for a neutral game.
Exactly. It just shows you. People have now actually started the problem was for the RFU, even though the product was terrible, it was still full houses. And I think now they're realizing that they need to actually do something more. So this World Cup, I said, it was, everyone presumed they were getting to the semi-final. They're not going to get to the semi-final unless there's a marked improvement, and it's hard to see where it's going to come from.
And Mick, I think the most bizarre thing about it was Fiji winning by 8 points in the end. I don't know what you thought. I didn't actually think Fiji were that good. They scored 3 tries off the back of having no real set piece platform. Like, ultimately, England gifted the win to Fiji, and I'm not trying to take anything away from what they did, but I'm pretty sure I've seen Fiji play a lot better a handful of times and lose by 20 points.
No, for sure. Like, as we mentioned earlier, I think there's just been an unbelievable opportunity for the likes of Fiji and the likes of your Manu Samoa and your Fiji and Drua playing in Super Rugby competition. I know you're saying that set piece, like, it didn't look particularly good, but it's so much better than what it has been in previous years. Like, I feel like Fiji have just had so many barriers of entry to actually unleash the individuals that they have. I thought Caleb Muntz had a really good game at 10. Thought he managed the game really, really well, because there was a bit of a kickback on Vola not making the squad, and like Fiji don't have to be mauling over the top of teams, or they don't have to have an incredible scrum. They just need to do enough to actually give their outside men an opportunity to get into the game. And going back to, the benefits of those teams being in that competition, being in a strong domestic competition. If you just look at Japan, the Sunwolves obviously aren't in Super Rugby anymore. So they have Japanese top league, where it's a high standard with the international players being dropped in to get their payday or whatever. But the fact they're not playing against quality opposition really week on week, like the New Zealand and the Australian teams, it's been highlighted in how they've gone so far in their World Cup warm-up games, getting hockeyed by Italy, losing to Samoa or Tonga. I can't remember which one it was. But going back to your initial point, Fiji didn't play particularly well. Set piece wasn't great, but at the same time, they did enough to give their outside men an opportunity to actually get into the game. And then, it's a funny one. We were speaking about Sinfield there. He obviously went pretty well with Leicester from a defensive point of view, but as Birch would be able to tell you better than I would, the international step up is it's huge, and to see kind of Sinfield struggling from or England's defense kind of struggling under Sinfield, and then myself and Birch would have played under Mike Forshaw as well in Connacht, and he's obviously looking after Wales, and they're not looking too hot defensively either, so whether there's something around the league background that these guys have come from, I don't know. I'm basically just throwing that out there. It's going to be very interesting to see if they can get it together in time for the World Cup.
Yeah, just on that, Mick, I think there's been more failed rugby league converts to defence coaching than successes. I mean, for every Sean Edwards, there's 5 or 6 others. And even if you look at Farrell is probably had his best success as a head coach, and being that figurehead. And I'm not saying he wasn't a good defence coach, but for him and Sean Edwards are probably the 2 biggest successes. But there's been many tried in Australian rugby, a huge amount of NRL converts as well. And Sinfield's obviously a huge motivator and a leader, but wow, their defensive system is nearly non-existent. And then you had Borthwick after the game talking about, we need to, we're falling off tackles. We need to work harder on our tackle tech. Yourself, most pros, international players have okay tackle tech. You could question Billy Vunipola and Farrell's over the last couple of weeks, but for different reasons, right? They were connecting, whereas the English players weren't in position to make hits, and it's going to be difficult. I think when you look back at what he did with Leicester, I don't know if the background to Borthwick's success at Leicester is a little bit of a Moneyball story. His recruitment was really shrewd. He hired outsourced a lot of his advice to a stat-based company who were able to say, look, this guy can give you 15 minutes off the bench and he can do X, and he'll fit into your salary cap. But also he brought in Liebenberg and Jasper Wiese, who bully, and Montana the hooker from Argentina. At Premiership level, they can bully people, and they did, and they got him on the front foot. Whereas, let's be honest, the English forwards at the moment, Itoje is way off. Ben Earls has had some good moments. Courtney Law's not too bad, but realistically, that English pack individually or collectively aren't bullying anybody. So his forwards aren't on the front foot like they were for Leicester. And then if you're on the front foot as forwards, the kicking game becomes easier. You win more balls back in the air, etc. So it's a big fix. But I think, they have an easier group. But I think now they're going to start looking over their shoulder about, can they actually qualify for it? And Samoa will be licking their lips.
Well, that leads me very nicely. Go ahead, Mick.
Sorry, Neil. I was just going to say there, following on from Birch's point around system, looking at England and Wales over the last couple of weeks, you'd question whether there is a system in place, because the messaging that I would have gotten working with rugby league defence coaches in the past is get the baseball bat out and get up and twat them. That was essentially what you were told. Just get in a position where you can get off the line and get up and hit someone as hard as you can. But, I on the flip side of that, I've sat in plenty of reviews where, my team was in defence and they had a 7-man overlap and the defence coach is saying, just get off the line. Just get off and hit someone, as opposed to trying to shepherd them to the touchline or giving up a few yards so that you can, somewhat try and put out a fire. So I think it's going to be fascinating to see over the coming weeks what the players do to kind of get things sorted, because at the end of the day, it's if the defense coaches are happy enough with how things have been going, which I'm sure they aren't. I'm not going to speak for them. The players will have to put a bit of a plan in place so that they can be effective and win games essentially.
Just final point, sorry Neil. Final point on this, and Mick tied in Wales nicely. Of the three countries that changed coach late, Wales, England, and Australia, they've only won 5 games in total since they made that change. And I think Wales beat England, England beat Wales. So that's 2 of them. So for any CEO out there, unless there's a big change at this World Cup, that last kind of minute panic hasn't brought immediate success anyway. And obviously Wales lost to Wales have just been very, very poor. The only bright spot was beating England in that first warm-up game, really. So it's going to be tight.
The last bit I'll finish up then with on England just very, very quickly, and I'll put it to both the almost in a word. Will England still get to a quarter final? Gun to your head.
Yes to me, just about.
Yeah, I think they will.
And did they get to a semi-final?
No.
I can't wait for a potential England-Australia. The only reason I want England to get to a quarter-final is so they can go up against Eddie Jones potentially in a quarter-final. But fingers crossed we'll get to see that. But listen, we're out of time, guys. Thanks a million. That's all we have time for this week. We'll be back next week with a slight change of plans, slight twist for the next few weeks, because we're going to be bringing you 2 podcasts each week on the RTÉ Rugby podcast for the duration of the Rugby World Cup. First of those will be up on either Monday or Tuesday, and then we'll have a second one later on in the week. We'll figure out the fine details in the next few days. But until then, we'll speak to you soon.